History is filled with legendary warriors whose names echoed across battlefields long after they were gone. Some fought for freedom, some fought for honor. Others fought simply because survival demanded it. Every age created its own unstoppable champion, men and women whose courage reshaped the course of history. This is the story of some of the deadliest warriors ever to live. A cold wind swept through the forests of northern Europe as a young tribal leader watched Roman soldiers build another fortress on lands that did not belong to them. His name was Arminius. As a child, he had been taken from his people and raised inside the Roman Empire. He learned their language, studied their tactics, and even served as an officer in the Roman army. The empire believed he had become one of them. They were wrong for years. Arminius patiently earned the trust of Roman commanders while secretly planning their destruction. He united rival Germanic tribes that had spent generations fighting each other. Convincing them to stand together proved harder than fighting Rome itself, but Arminius knew that divided, they would all eventually become subjects of the empire. In the year 9 CE, the opportunity finally arrived. Roman governor Publius Quinctilius Varus marched 3 powerful legions through dense woodland after Arminius warned him of a supposed rebellion nearby. It was a trap. Heavy rain turned the roads into mud, while thick trees broke the Roman formations apart. Hidden warriors attacked from every direction before disappearing back into the forest. The disciplined legions, unbeatable on open ground, suddenly found themselves surrounded by enemies they could barely see for 3 relentless days. The ambush continued. Roman shields became useless among the trees. Cavalry could not maneuver. Supplies disappeared into the mud, and thousands of experienced soldiers were cut down. By the end of the battle, 3 entire Roman legions had ceased to exist, proving that even the mightiest empire in the world could bleed. Far across the mountains of southern Africa, another warrior was changing history. His name was Shaka, and he was born into exile, rejected by powerful chiefs, and forced to grow up in hardship. Every insult, every beating, and every hungry night shaped him into a relentless fighter. When he became a soldier, he quickly proved himself unlike anyone around him. He believed battles were won through discipline, speed, and fearless aggression. Instead of throwing spears from a distance, his warriors charged directly into the enemy, carrying short stabbing spears and massive shields that turned every fight into brutal hand-to-hand combat. Shaka trained his soldiers until they could march for incredible distances, barefoot across rocky ground, while maintaining perfect formations. He organized them into a deadly tactic known as the buffalo horns, where the strongest fighters pinned the enemy in place, while faster units surrounded them from both sides, trapping entire armies with no escape. Villages that once feared constant raids suddenly united under his command, and his kingdom expanded faster than anyone believed possible. Rival chiefs who refused to join were defeated one after another, and thousands of experienced warriors fell before Shaka's disciplined army. Stories spread across the region, describing soldiers who could cover impossible distances in a single day and overwhelm enemies before they even realized an attack had begun. Although his empire would eventually fracture after his death, Shaka completely transformed the art of warfare in southern Africa, and his military innovations influenced generations of commanders, proving that one determined leader could change the fate of an entire continent. Centuries later, on the windswept plains of Central Asia, another legendary warrior was building an empire unlike anything the world had ever seen. His name was Subutai, born into a humble nomadic family with no claim to wealth or noble blood. Yet his extraordinary intelligence quickly caught the attention of Genghis Khan, instead of relying on brute strength alone. Subutai mastered strategy, deception, and speed, leading armies across deserts, mountains, frozen rivers, and endless grasslands with astonishing precision. He coordinated multiple forces separated by hundreds of miles so that they struck their enemies at exactly the same moment, leaving entire kingdoms confused and surrounded before they even realized they were under attack. Cities protected by towering walls, powerful knights, and massive armies, All fell before his carefully planned campaigns. He rarely fought the battle. His enemies expected, instead, luring them into ambushes, exhausting them with false retreats, and destroying them when they were weakest under his command. The Mongol armies conquered territories stretching from China to Eastern Europe, defeating some of the strongest military powers of the medieval world, despite never ruling as emperor himself. Many historians consider Subutai one of the greatest military commanders in history, because his tactics remained centuries ahead of their time and influenced warfare long after his final campaign had ended. On the seas surrounding the Korean peninsula, another warrior rose to legend. His name was Yi Sun-sin, and he lived in a time when his nation faced overwhelming invasion from a far larger empire with better supplies and greater numbers. Despite political betrayal and being stripped of rank earlier in his life, he returned to command when his country needed him, most rebuilding a shattered navy from almost nothing. He designed a new kind of war at sea where discipline formation and knowledge of currents mattered more than sheer numbers. He became famous for his iron-armored ships known as turtle ships, which were heavily protected and terrifying in close combat. When enemy fleets advanced, he used narrow straits and unpredictable tides to trap them, forcing massive enemy armadas into confined waters where they could not maneuver under his command. Smaller Korean fleets repeatedly defeated vastly larger Japanese naval forces, using precise timing, coordinated fire, and psychological pressure that broke enemy morale. Entire invasions were slowed or stopped at sea long before reaching land, and despite being heavily outnumbered in nearly every engagement, he continued to win battle after battle through pure tactical genius. His final victory came even as he was fatally wounded in combat, ordering his soldiers to hide his death, so the battle would not be lost in panic, and his fleet still succeeded in destroying the enemy before news of his fall spread, making Yi Sun-sin one of the greatest naval commanders in history, whose legacy became a symbol of resilience against impossible odds. In the frozen forests of northern Europe during the Winter War, another name became feared across entire armies. His name was Simo Häyhä, a quiet farmer who lived a simple life before war reached his homeland. When the Soviet Union invaded Finland, he joined the defense forces and quickly became one of the most effective snipers in military history. Dressed completely in white to blend with the snow, he waited for hours in silence, enduring freezing temperatures without movement or complaint. He relied on patience, precision, and deep knowledge of the terrain, rather than advanced equipment, often using a simple rifle without a scope, while enemies struggled to even locate him. Hidden among snow-covered trees, he would strike with extreme accuracy and disappear again into the landscape. Soviet troops began to fear him so much they called him the White Death, believing he was more spirit than human during some of the harshest conditions imaginable. He continued fighting even after being injured. Surviving against overwhelming odds, his actions slowed entire enemy divisions and forced changes in Soviet tactics. Although he was eventually wounded beyond return to combat, he survived the war and lived quietly afterward, but his record of confirmed engagements and his reputation for unmatched stealth made him one of the deadliest snipers in recorded history, and a final example of how one determined individual can influence the course of a war against a far larger force.